So, thank you all. This is kind of now to the live audience and you guys. As you know, we've been having tech issues. So we're going to do some interviews online. Please grab some food. If you're out there, go. No, I'm going to talk to you. Grab some food, hang out, come back. We're going to do the panel interviews in about 20 minutes or so. We have some very, very, very special guests lined up. And first off, thank you, Addie, who is in the chat room. Addie is currently homeless, and BG's also helping moderate. She's formerly homeless. So everything we do engages homeless people in some way or another. And I am just going to get right to it. I'm going to bring on Dianne Yentel, who is the CEO of the National Low Income Housing Coalition. Dianne, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Mark. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, we were gonna do this so many times, and we finally got a chance to talk online, and we have to do it more often.
Yes.
Can you first tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what your organization does?
Sure. As you said, I'm president and CEO of the National Low Income Housing Coalition. We are a membership organization. Our work is all about advancing and achieving racially and socially equitable public policies that ensure that people with the lowest incomes have decent, affordable, accessible homes in communities of their choice. And I've been doing this work for over 25 years, but I've been in this role at the coalition for coming on 7 years now.
You were one of my heroes, and I just adore you. And
likewise, Mark.
You know, you were in here in Los Angeles, and one of the first things you did was text me and said you wanted to go hand out socks.
Yes.
That was so awesome.
Because you're a hero of mine, because you do such incredible work, and I'm so grateful for you. And I'm grateful. Congratulations on this film. Really, really great, important work. Thank you.
It's so many people behind the scenes made this happen, from the individuals that donated to fund the movie to cast and crew. It's really been amazing, and it's so important. We, you know, as you know, this is what we do. So first, talk about the affordable housing crisis in America.
Well, so to some people, the affordable housing crisis, it seems or feels newer. And that's because of late hitting the middle class. And like with most social justice issues, when it hits the middle class is when it starts to get a degree of attention that it should for many years before. But for people with the lowest incomes, there has been a housing crisis for decades, really. And we have in our country a shortage of 7 million homes, affordable and available for the lowest income people. So another way of saying that same number is for every 10 of the lowest income households, families, there's fewer than 4 apartments that are affordable and available to them. So this is why we have homelessness in our country. It's why we have millions of families paying far more than half of their very limited income rent each month. We have families paying, 60, 70, 80% of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. And when you have such limited income to begin with, and you pay so much of it for your home, you're always one financial shock away from missing rent and facing eviction, and in worst cases, becoming homeless. A lot like what we saw the story told in the movie that we just watched. It just takes that one unexpected payment, like a broken down car, a sick child, a missed day of work, to miss rent, and then this spiraling into poverty that results from eviction.
Sorry, we're having one thing, I used to do broadcast television, and live events never fazed me, multi-camera, but YouTube live streaming, there's always technical issues. So we're having a little bit of echo. I apologize, and we're trying to do a hybrid for the people here in the theater. But 7 million homes. We're short 7 million homes. How does that influence homelessness?
Well, it's the reason why we have homelessness. It's the reason why we have so many of the lowest income people that are doubled or tripled up, living in unsafe, substandard housing, living in motels or hotels like we saw in the film. And it doesn't actually mean, sometimes people get that number mixed up and think that it means necessarily that we need to build 7 million more apartments. It doesn't mean that. It means we have a shortage of 7 million homes that are both affordable and accessible for the lowest income people. So in some cases, we do need to build much more housing, and we need to build it at all income levels. And we do that by removing restrictive local zoning that prevents us from building enough apartments in some communities. And we need to build it and ensure that it's affordable to the lowest income people through programs like the National Housing Trust Fund, where 100% of those units are affordable to extremely low income people. But in some places, there are enough apartments, but the people who live in them can't afford them. And so there needs to be a bridge between what people earn and what rent costs. And the most effective way to do that is through rental assistance subsidies, through Section 8 vouchers. We heard that mentioned in the film today, where the social worker talked about how it's usually years, a 5-year wait, I think she said in the story. And that's exactly right. It can be years, it can be decades to get the rental assistance that's needed. But we need that bridge between what people earn and what the rent is. And when rent goes up, if their income hasn't gone up, that housing voucher can provide housing stability for them to stay in the unit and not end up losing their home. So there's a number of solutions that are needed. There's a number of ways that we got to where we are. But really the bottom line that I think everybody needs to understand is that homelessness is solvable. The eviction crisis that we're facing is solvable. What we lack is the political will to actually fund solutions at the scale necessary, but we have the solutions.
One of the, you know me, I'm not big on the stats, but one of the things that really has hit me is that with every $100 increase in median rent, homelessness goes up 9%.
Yeah.
And we just broke a record of the median rent. And people often think it's Los Angeles or New York or Seattle, but in Greensboro, North Carolina, rents have just gone up 75%.
Yeah.
Austin, 40%. Orlando, 30%. There is no city, small, huge, medium, that is not struggling because of the affordable housing crisis.
That's right. And many of the renters who are struggling to pay the rent right now, they were struggling before the pandemic, and they were struggling during the pandemic. But during the pandemic, policymakers at all levels actually responded to the tremendous crisis that existed, to the potential for an eviction tsunami. And they provided resources and protections on a scale unlike any in our lifetime. So we had a federal moratorium on all evictions for non-payment of rent, and that was in place for almost a year. And the federal government provided $46 billion for emergency rental assistance to help pay the rent or pay the rent arrears when tenants fell behind after cities shut down and people lost their income. Now we're at a place where those protections have expired. Those resources are almost all gone. And as you say, rents have been skyrocketing, and not just rents, right? Inflation has reached record levels, and costs across the board have been increasing. So many of those same renters who have extremely low incomes, whether because they're seniors, they're people with disabilities on really limited fixed incomes or because they work very low wage jobs, they're struggling more than ever. And the resources to help them stay housed don't exist anymore in many of these communities. And as you say, as a direct result of that is increasing homelessness. As you said, every $100 per month median increase in rent leads to a 9% increase in homelessness. And last year, on average, rents were increased by $200 a month. So we are already seeing increasing homelessness as a result, and it will just continue unless and until the federal government funds solutions at the scale necessary to keep people stably housed.
What can we do about it? Now, Sandra Vargas from City Law Center is about to come up to talk to people about what somebody might be going through the eviction. But what could the public that, we know there's this affordable housing crisis. How do we reach out to our politicians, both locally and nationally? What can we do that's actually going to influence change?
Right. Well, policymakers need to hear from their constituents that this is an issue that matters to them. So we need to register and get out to vote, because politicians don't only listen to constituents, they listen to voting constituents, and they know the difference. They know who's registered and who's not, and who votes and who doesn't. So register to vote, and then be in touch with your members of Congress. Call them often and tell them what you're seeing, tell them what your concerns are, and ask them what they're doing to respond. They are responsive to when a large number of their constituents raise an issue. And we have challenges on both sides of the aisles with Republicans and Democrats, different types of challenges, different degrees of support, but none, frankly, very, very few are prioritizing the need to act positively towards addressing homelessness as need to. So the more you call your member of Congress and tell them this is an issue that matters to you and ask them what they're doing to respond, the more they're going to start to feel that pressure and start to act on it. So, and don't worry about whether you're enough of an expert or whether you know the solutions specifically or the data. You know everything you need to know to be in touch with your member of Congress, which is what matters most to you as a constituent and how you want to see them act. Oh, I can't hear you, Mark.
There's a delay here in the theater, so I've been trying to mute my mic when I'm not speaking. But as we said yesterday or this morning, we could talk about this for hours.
Absolutely.
So would you please come back and we'll just do a show about affordable housing. And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Mark. It's great to be here. Congratulations, and thank you for your work on the film. Take care.
Hey, everybody. It's so awesome because I just saw Karis, who's sitting in the front row over there. And it was like the space-time continuum or something. This hybrid live and in person, we're going to get better at it. This is the first time. But right now, I felt it important to have somebody that could talk to people that might be facing an eviction or concerned about it. Or I know as we've been doing these live streams, there's so many people that are facing homelessness or are homeless that are in the chat room. Addie's in the chat room as a moderator. She's homeless. So I wanted to get somebody that could speak to those people that are joining us today, and honored to have Sandra from the Inner City Law Office. So first, Sandra, thank you for being here. And could you please tell me a little bit about yourself and the Inner City Law Office?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I work at Inner City Law Center, which is a nonprofit based in the city of Los Angeles, and we are currently the only full-time legal services provider on Skid Row. Our office handles all kinds of issues related to homelessness, but I specifically handle eviction defense. I've been doing eviction defense since I've been barred at Inner City, and I've seen a lot of different types of evictions during the pandemic and before the pandemic. And I'm happy to talk about what people can do in that situation.
One thing, and you sent it to me in an email that I think let's start right off with. And I know as a case manager, so often people would wait to ask for help. And you were talking about how with the moratoriums, people think, oh, there's a moratorium, I don't have to file this court thing or whatever. Could you address that? Because if you're going through an eviction process, there are some things you got to take care of, and you got to do it in the time that the court wants.
Yeah, so there has been kind of like this misnomer of calling the eviction protections moratorium, such as the CDC order that was in effect up until about mid last year. But there's word moratorium has been thrown around a lot, and it's confused a lot of tenants into thinking there's a moratorium. That means that my landlord can't file an eviction against me. That means my landlord can't evict me, period. What I really hope that people take away from this today and understand is that there are eviction protections related to COVID, but you have to assert them. They don't just appear, they're not automatic. You have to assert those protections. And the best thing that you can do if you are served with a summons and complaint, or if you think you're going to be served with an eviction, is to get legal help, to reach out to a legal services provider or a private attorney who specializes in eviction defense. And it's really important to make sure that you're talking to someone who specializes in eviction defense, because if they're going to have an understanding of these laws. They're very complicated, convoluted laws with a lot of intersection as to state, local, federal laws. And so it's really important to have an attorney who can navigate that for a tenant and who can help them understand what those rights are and how to assert them to prevent an eviction.
You bring up a very important point. How does somebody seek legal counsel? I mean, especially somebody that's no or low income.
I think that depends on where you live. I think, what I would suggest generally is to look up legal services provider either for your city, your state, or your county. For example, Los Angeles County has the Stay Housed LA program in which a tenant can sign up if they've received a notice to quit or if they've received a summons and complaint for an eviction and they're able to register. You might want to look to see if there's similar programs in your county or your state to find out if they have legal assistance for low-income tenants, because it's really hard to navigate these things without a lawyer. About 90% of landlords have attorneys representing them in court, and about less than 10% of tenants have attorneys representing them in court. There's a big disparity in amongst tenants and landlords as to who's represented and who knows their rights and who doesn't, and who's showing up to court alone. And that's when tenants can get talked into taking settlements that may not be in their interest, or they get talked into moving out when maybe that's not what they want to do. And talking to a lawyer before that case is filed, or talking to them and learning how you can assert your defenses, can really change the course of an eviction and can help put tenants in a better position than if they were going into court by themselves.
I have to mirror that and just say I've been evicted twice. And one, the landlord, just as you said, we went to court. They had representation. I didn't, and it didn't work out for me and my girlfriend at the time. It was just a really bad situation. And the second time was illegal. LAPD gave me 30 minutes to leave the house that I was at. And when I said this is illegal, the officer looked at his watch and said, now you have 29 minutes. And it really happened. And it's a long story. I don't want to go into here, but the feeling of having your housing ripped from you. And, you know, it eventually was my path to homelessness, is overwhelming. It's crushing. What would, and I know you can't give legal advice, and I know we're talking very broad here because California is different than Texas, then it's different than New York, different than Florida. What would you say to people other than, like, you know, don't wait, get some legal representation? Basically, all of a sudden you can't pay rent, you know, you can't pay rent, and you get the eviction notice. I mean, panic, call somebody. I mean, what's the next step?
Mhm. Thank you so much for sharing that story. I've been in a similar situation too. I've been evicted before, which is what led me into this line of work. And it's really tough. And I think apart from getting legal help as soon as you can, I think something else that I would tell tenants is to stay strong in yourself and really look out for your best interests. I think a lot of people, especially in a landlord tenant situation where they feel like it's not fair that the landlord is filing this eviction against them when the landlord hasn't followed the law in the past or is currently breaking the law. There can be a lot of feelings about that. And I think something that I would recommend to tenants is to work on putting those feelings aside and to look at what is the best plan for you. What would put you in the best situation to put you in a more sustainable housing situation? And I think, you know, I would really just suggest that people reach out to an attorney so they can understand what their options are, whether it's, you know, to negotiate some way to stay in the home or negotiate a soft landing. I think it's really important to talk to an attorney about those options because the option for me may not be the best option for, you know, someone else. And it's really, you know, it's the tenant's home. It's the tenant who's either going to go to that home or not. It's not, you know, the attorney's decision. We are here to advise, you know, to tenants and let them know what their options are, but it's really the tenants who are empowered to make that decision. And I would really just recommend making that decision from a place of calm, from a place of, you know, looking at your best self-interest.
Well, thank you very much for spending the time. It was an honor to meet you. I would like to do more on this topic. And since you're local, maybe we'll do a special video. But thank you for.
Absolutely.
So now they are going to get ready on the stage. Luciana, who's a much better host than I am, is going to interview the cast and crew. So while they're getting set up, they have to turn off the projection. And yeah, you can turn off my mic. And I will just talk to you all. Thank you all for joining. And I saw Walter was in the house, and I see Dano's in the house. How y'all doing? Walter. For those that you don't know, Walter is a friend of mine. You might have seen his video on Invisible People. Walter has schizophrenia. He was out on the streets in Venice, and now he is housing. And Walter is always sending me messages encouraging me. So they are getting ready. Hey, 1 and 2, you're very kind. I will ask. So if you guys have any questions, put them in the chat. When we get to that point, I will pass them on to Luciana. But right now, no, they're still setting up. Live productions. For those of you that have been with me every Sunday night for the last couple of years, you know this live technical stuff drives me crazy. And here we're pushing the envelope, but that is what Invisible People has always done. So, you ready, Luciana? You ready? 1 minute. 1 minute. Drum roll, please. I almost, Karis just asked a question and I almost just answered her. So this online virtual hybrid thing is crazy. But you ready? Okay. We're going to Luciana, cast and crew. Take it away.
We spent a lot of time interviewing different single mothers that had an experience with homelessness. And it was really hard for me to write the story because it was so personal. You know, growing up, I was raised by a single mother. We were really at the brink of homelessness for a while. And for a moment, it was difficult. And I had to really connect with my inner child to get.
Should be working. Welcome.
Hello, there he goes. So I'm going to pass on the torch.
No, I was just trying to get the lights out of their eyes.
How's it going? Christopher Sheffield, cinematographer. One thing that was really, really cool about this project is just how easy it was to sort of conceive a lot of these scenes. Oftentimes you have a million choices when you enter into a new script. But for this one, there was just sort of like one choice for every scene, and it was always just like the most truthful version of every scene. You know, there wasn't a lot of sort of filmmaking padding going along. We would just sort of enter into the scene, figure out what was the realist and most upfront representation of what would happen in this scenario, and go with that. And it was a very refreshing way, I think, to approach a movie.
Hi, can anybody hear me? Okay. Hi, Tanda Corinne. I played Martha. I think the entire script was just emotional for me. I was an emotional wreck the entire time. Everybody can attest. The entire time that we shot, for a number of reasons. But I think a lot of things kind of dredged up for me after having dealt with homelessness myself, after a tumultuous, abusive situation. So I think for me, it was just a matter of just kind of tapping in and bringing a lot of those emotions to the scene and living in that. So that was something that was super important to me. But also, I think having the freedom to make certain choices throughout the scenes, I think sort of what Chris had sort of alluded to. So pass it to my girl.
Hi, I'm Ebony Jewel Charity, and I was Jenny. I played Jenny, and I really enjoyed in the set, like during the set and the filming, that I got to step into someone that I wasn't, and I got to have like a POV of someone else who was homeless, a child, because that is something that's very hard, especially for someone my age. So I got to feel what they would feel in that. I got to basically just have a wider perspective because I'm very grateful for my life and that all that I have.
how do you follow that? You know? I'm Marlene Clark. I play the judge, and I'm really proud to have been asked to be part of this this project. It just really seeing it completed just made me very, very proud and very emotional. It was very I'm starting to throw. But anyway, I'm part of a wonderful artist collective, and so many of us were asked to be part of this. So thank you so much, and I'm on your team anytime.
Hi, my name is Antonio D. Charity. I played the father of my daughter, Ebony Jewel. And that for me was the most memorable, enjoyable, fascinating, and amazing part of being in this production, is just watching her do her thing.
The process of casting this movie was really collaborative. We reached out to all our friends. You know, it's like our beautiful Ebony Jewel told us. It was very personal, and I was so grateful that all my child actors were just incredibly professional. I have never had a situation where every single child actor was ready, prepared, memorized, want to take 20 takes, can we do it again, laughing. It really was such a fun time. Thanks to Tanda, who also helped us find a lot of the talent that we had on screen. And I remember reaching out to Antonio and being like, hey, I'm friends of a friend of a friend. And I found your Instagram, and, I saw that you have a daughter who is a child actor, and I have this movie. And he's like, who sent you again? And I was like trying to be well, it was a friend of a friend who worked with you on this other project. So I'm very grateful for everybody who donated their time and their expertise to this project. It meant a lot to us. So, Mark, any questions from the audience?
Yes, Karis asked if anybody has lived experience of homelessness or eviction.
Well, okay, I guess I do. Well, I think I've already alluded to that. I've already mentioned it. So yes, I do have obviously some homelessness experience. Several years ago, was still sort of in a tumultuous situation, an abusive situation, and I found myself living in my car for a week, and it was one of the most difficult experiences I've ever had to face. I showered at the gym, did whatever else I had to do at the gym, and thank God for that gym membership. And I had to make the best of it. I couch surfed for a while as well after that, stayed with really good friends, sorors of mine as well, and did just what I had to do to survive. And I took odd jobs. I have 4 degrees. Why would I have to take an odd job? It was just the most difficult time trying to find a job. It was horrible, but I had to make it through, and I did the very best that I could. I sold all of my designer items, and I just made the best of my situation. And it wasn't anything other than a humbling and a character building experience. And so I'm super grateful for that experience, because it did nothing but add to my arsenal of what I needed as an actor, but it also just helped prepare me for other things in life. Not that I hadn't already been through enough, but it was definitely something that I'll never forget. But again, super grateful to have been a part of this and to have been able to bring that. So yeah, I don't know if anybody else. Okay.
One of the things too in early pre-production that helped drive our decisions in the film was that so much of the script was derived from very, very specific accounts, research that Luciana did. She can probably expand on that a little bit more, but just to the point that when we came down to breaking down a scene and figuring out how we're going to do certain things or what resources were available to us, there were certain aspects of the film that just there was no give on, because we knew that like this has to be represented the way that it was told to us from a firsthand account, so that we were telling the truth and not just sort of making things up.
And thank you to the women and the children that I spoke to as we were developing this story. Eviction is a very complex process. It's different in every state. I'm also grateful to a lot of the specialists we spoke to, coalitions, Family First, everybody who came on board. Mark, who runs Invisible People, who has such an expertise in what's happening in the homeless crisis that we're living today. So I'm very grateful to these women who trusted me and who opened up, and teenagers and kids I was able to speak to, allowed me to speak to their children. We couldn't do this without you. And what we're trying to do here is a fair, real representation of what's happening on the streets. And as Chris mentioned, we're not trying to glorify it, glossify it, Hollywoodify it. We're trying to just tell a story and hoping that that's gonna help people understand that what's happening out there could happen to me, could happen to you, could happen to anybody at any time. It's not a them problem, it's an us problem.
Dano from the UK, and remember to repeat my question or their question. We got somebody to request that. Is asked if there's a follow-up movie.
The question is if there's a follow-up movie. We're working on this as we're tackling each different aspect of homelessness through these short stories. So there is no, at this moment, eviction follow-up movie, but we're already working on our next project, which is a veteran story talking about the criminalization of homelessness. We've all been seeing the displacement of the campsites. We're going to be traveling to Missouri next. This is a national problem, so we try to travel to different places at every segment. The problem is everywhere. It's not an LA problem, a New York problem, a big city problem. It's a United States issue that we all have to tackle.
A lot of people are saying great job and all that, but I have a question. I have a question for Chris, because you used a color palette that made it feel like Vegas, and I mean, it was intentional. And it's a little different than anything else I've seen. The decisions you made, how you went into that, and then like the shelter scene, you didn't use that color palette. You made it different. So what was the thought process into that? And I hope you take this as a compliment that it's meant to be, because you watch the film and you go, it's hot. It's 114 outside, right?
Yeah. So we shot a little bit in Vegas. A lot of it was shot in Los Angeles, as far as, just being closer to the actors and the sets that we needed, that sort of thing. So one of the ways that we were able to connect those two was, as Mark said, the color palette, which is a very, very earth tone based sort of color palette. And that helped a lot. And then also just as sort of constant reminder to always be letting the sun into the scene. So in any given like interior scene, like, if I grew up in Arizona and I have friends that grew up in Vegas, it's a very similar vibe that you can't really escape that sun. It's always coming in through a crack in the window somewhere, and anything that it's hitting is you could be in an air conditioned room and you'd start sweating, and not realize that you were just standing too close to the window. So when you have a situation where somebody can't get inside four walls and a door, you have to make sure that the exterior pressure visually matches what's going on emotionally. So that was the idea of bringing the sun into every single room. And then by the time we get to the women's shelter, she's at a place where she is sort of in the best way that she can, taking control of her circumstances again. So there was a kind of a chance for us to explore like a slightly different, now that she is sort of at a place where she's settled, she has a job, that she's sort of on the building back path. However, still, far down that is on her life journey. It was a chance to kind of change the color palette up a little bit and not be as sort of earth toned and blasted with sunlight. We could kind of explore a different look.
Kate, who is definitely not a plant, even though she's Invisible People CEO or COO, excuse me. She asked, what issues related to eviction did you want to cover, but you weren't able to put into this movie?
Gosh, there's so many issues related to eviction that we weren't able to cover. What I was trying to do here is to have a general sense of how it works in most states. As we said, every state's a bit different. So I wanted to make sure that somebody in Kentucky and somebody in New York could kind of relate to a story that was set in Vegas. But as we know, per state, the whole legal system varies slightly here and there. A second concern was to make sure that what's happening with the children in the story is really realistic. So I spent a lot of time talking to family first. One of the biggest concerns I hear from parents who go into homelessness is the fear of losing their children. And speaking to the single mothers, all of them told me how afraid they were to tell anyone that they were either living in their cars or they're staying with friends because they were afraid they're going to lose their kids. And after speaking to experts, they said that homelessness is not neglect. No one is going to lose their child because they don't have a home. So I think that's important to say. Anybody experiencing this with a minor, there are organizations and things you can reach out. Hopefully, more helpful than the ones you've seen in this movie. But there are some options that you should explore. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And that was the number one thing that came up consistently was that. So I wanted to have that sense in this movie and in the relationship between Martha and Jenny's dad. It was interesting because that was a true story that was told to me of this ex-husband who found a doctor who deemed him unable to work. So his now current wife is the one, quote unquote, providing. And this woman would tell me how, if you met him at a bar, he would be the nicest guy buying everyone dinner. Meanwhile, his child was homeless and he would refuse to help. So you see that contradiction, throughout these stories of how to get around the system. So I was very concerned that at least the point of view of the child was accurate. That was the number one thing. But I also have a question for the actors. It was an emotional character for all of you. How did you prepare to get into those characters?
Again, I think for me, I just pulled from real life experience, prepared and just kind of sat with the material. But I also had to make a choice about how I wanted her to be seen. I didn't want her to be this downtrodden, just completely broken, not put together. I wanted her to be seen as someone with some dignity, who has some self-respect, who didn't want the world to look at her where the chips were down and everything was falling down around her. And I wanted her to be seen as someone who was living in a reality that she didn't want to live in, but was doing the very best that she could to make sure that she made the best choices for herself and her child. So it was something that I think also part of who I am. I was always taught, you don't go outside looking unpresentable and things of that nature. So I kind of wanted to make sure that I prepared in that way where I kept that mindset for this particular character, because there are a lot of women who are in these situations who you'll never know. They'll shop at Dress for Success, or they'll shop at the Goodwill, or they'll shop someplace and they'll be so put together and you'll never know. And so I think that was a part of my preparation process to ensure that she wasn't seen as somebody who was ignorant and who didn't know anything or didn't have it, but somebody who had values and who had morals and who had dreams and desires and who wanted better. So that was one of the ways in which I prepared, but also pulling from my real world experience.
I don't know. I think I would probably just think about what I would react to and how I would feel if I was being evicted from my home, which prayerfully would never happen to me. But I would just kind of think about, I guess, how I would react to that. But the other thing is when Tondo was always being emotional, I guess I just kind of followed off of that and just did what she did.
Well, as a judge, you're supposed to be impartial, and as a woman, it was also kind of emotional in terms of trying to stay impartial. So everything was on the page. I came with a certain mindset, but then I was given a note saying you want to help her, but you don't want to show that you're helping her. So that was just really great advice.
Well, I only had the one short scene. Didn't take a lot of preparation, but I prepared anyway. I just believed what was on the page. I just believed what you wrote and what you told me about the character. That was, in effect, my preparation. She told me this story. She told me this man was based on a true story. She told me about the lady's account of her husband, who could have and should have done a lot more, was able to but didn't, and that was motivation enough.
I was just told that my mic still works, so I can switch me, because this question is from me, because I know a little bit about the behind the scenes. But in eviction, people of color, black and brown, are overly represented, and I look at the stage and there's diversity on the stage. So I don't know. I mean, I know you work in diversity. So I don't know if anybody wants to speak about this, but I know behind the scenes, Luciana and I really were adamant that this had to be about a black mom going through this crisis, because that is the typical demographic of people, and then it perpetuates itself in neighborhoods that more people are going through the crisis. So could anybody want to talk about that? I mean, I know from my perspective that we push that, and diversity isn't always easy, but it's so important.
Yeah, I'll start speaking about that in a statistical level. We did a lot of research, and eviction and homelessness does impact diverse background families in a disproportional amount. But I wanted for everything to be represented on the screen, for it to be a colorful representation. So you see, I know Latinos, you see, with the domestic violence scene, you see a white family. I mean, everybody is affected. So I wanted that as well. We did do a lot of research and spoke to a lot of families. So that's what I tried to reproduce on the screen. But I'd love to hear from you guys. What is your more personal views on that?
Yeah, I'd like to say, because the homeless population is comprised of so many black and brown people, that's why everything that Ms. Karen said is so important. Because our typical image, the stereotypical idea of a homeless black woman, is someone who's dirty, someone who stinks, someone whose hair is unkempt, someone who's inarticulate, someone who's most likely on drugs, if not on drugs, mentally deranged, perhaps turning to prostitution. All of these stereotypes about what a homeless black woman looks like, behaves like. And that's why it's important that you made the choices that you did to add humanity to these black and brown people who are homeless. And there's a lot of mental illness. There are a lot of veterans. There are a lot of people who are, in fact, on drugs, but that's not everybody. And it's important that we understand that.
Well, I work in diversity. I've been in diversity long before it was a trend. So I've seen the ebbs and the flows. But I think for me, working in the DEI space, I'm trying to make a correlation for you between working in the DEI space. So I work in the DEI space in corporate America and in academia, but also from Mark's perspective, what he shared, and also Luciana and also Craig, from a policy standpoint, which is what one of my degrees are in. From a policy standpoint, the disproportionate amount of people that have experienced and are experiencing homelessness, who are in the system, just period, in the system, regardless of whatever it is, it's overwhelming. But you have to understand the origins of that, and you have to understand the history of that. And if you don't know what that is, then it's very difficult to make the correlation to understand why it's so. And I won't sit here and give you a history lesson because the professor can, but and that's the professor in me. But I will say there is a direct correlation of historical context and variables and different components that have created and perpetuated that system. So it's unfortunate, but I think it's up to us to continue to change the narrative as much as we possibly can so that people can have a real world view. And as Craig mentioned, a humanity needs to be brought to as individuals and who we are, because we all are the human race. We have that in common. So I think that's all that I'm going to kind of lay it and leave it as. I don't want to say much.
And just to mention, Craig is Antonio's character's name. I keep calling Ebony Jenny. we got so comfortable on set that I continue to do that as well. So I totally understand. But yes, that's a true point. And a lot of the women I spoke to and the statistics also shows that homelessness is a cyclical problem. So if at some point in your childhood you've been homeless, you're most likely to become homeless as an adult. And then you're most likely to have kids in the streets. And then again, the problem continues and perpetuates. So that's what we're trying to show here is that there's more that we can do. But at the same time, it is a disproportional problem. And what can we do to make the help consistent with the disproportional issue?
I have a question, and then I mean, I would we'll start winding it down. This is obviously an extremely low budget. I mean, I try not to tell people how little we spent because then they judge it, right? Because then they say, "Oh, that's because it's a very well produced film, and it doesn't look like the budget." How do you do that? I know money makes everything easier. It does. But you guys, from the acting craft to the cinematography to everything, you guys put in the extra effort. And is there any motivation or thoughts about that? Because, for social impact films, we don't have huge money. So to be able to do something like that, I'm extremely grateful to you guys. But I know, you guys have to say, these guys aren't going to pay a whole lot, and this is going to pay, and maybe I won't give it the extra effort, right? But you guys did. You rose up to the occasion, all of you, and I'm very much impressed. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, my first thing to say is thank you, especially to our producer Amy, who couldn't be here today. I mean, she was a force of nature and pulled this together with so much class and grace. I wish she could be here, but I'm very grateful. And I think the answer to this question is community. When I called every single person in this cast and crew and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm making this film about eviction to hope to create change, but I don't have a lot of money," the same answer was every time, "Yes, I don't care, sign me up." And that was so powerful. The community really rallied together. I'm incredibly grateful. And I'd love to hear from you guys what gave you this extra warmth to put in more than was requested out of you. Also, thank you to our PAs and our production team who did more than they were signed up to do. Like Delaney was doing my makeup and, helping with the costume, and Shannon was pulling the lights with Chris. Like, it was really just an insane team effort.
Yeah, when you're working on a film like this, a lot of it, I think, just comes down to resource balancing and just understanding what the most important aspect of any given scene is, and then making sure that that is where your money and your resources are focused. So instead of having a room full of people, you have a room with 2 people who are going to give an absolutely stellar performance. And just knowing like what is the smartest way to get us into that room and to fill that room with set design that feels true to what you're doing, and that sort of thing. So the more clear your vision is on your project, the easier it becomes to sort of resource balance, so that it's always going to be a sort of independent hustle to pull a project like this together and to make sure that it doesn't look like the numbers on the spreadsheet. But again, like the project itself definitely infers on like how well you can do that. And so, like I said, the fact that we came into this with a very clear vision made it really easy for us to look at 2 options and pick the one that spoke to us, instead of having a million things. We had 3 things that worked as good as a million would. So
It was a labor of love. I'll just say that. It was a labor of love because it was hot outside. Um, it was a heat wave, and we honestly, there was a few times, we had to step inside. We had to have umbrellas. We had to, people were just like, "Do you want water?" all the time. It was really a lot. It was a lot, and it it does affect, especially the environment, right, outside. It does affect your performance, and it does bring another level of reality to whatever it is that that you're trying to convey on the screen. So yeah, it was a labor of love. I'll have to say that for the most part. And I told Mark, I said, can you just at least just give us a wardrobe and hair and makeup, just a wardrobe at least. Give us a wardrobe budget because we had to truck that suitcase around everywhere we went, and it was overwhelming. But other than that, it was a good time.
Yeah, I really enjoyed because I really enjoyed the other like younger children on the set with me because a lot of times when you're on sets there are a bunch of people that are older than you and then you're just sitting there like waiting for your part. But um but it was really fun because they had lots of activities and they had food there and they had just a big space where you could just have fun.
I'm part of a artist collective called We Make Movies, and one of our values is make a movie you want to see. And it's a wonderful collaborative group of people who really bond together. When the call comes out, everybody shows up and they get their A game. So most of the members of the cast are from this wonderful group of people, and as well as our producer, Amy Schumacher, was the executive producer. So when she called, we all jumped to it. So.
And I also really did enjoy having Spike on the set because he's just a really cute dog that I could just play with all the time. And what are the chances that someone has an adorable little dog on set where you can just play with him? And I really enjoyed that.
Spike was the star. Sadly, Spike couldn't make the panel today. Otherwise, Spike would be up on that stage.
Yeah, Spike is 100 years old, so he's napping right now. But he did good, and our Jenny Ebony was so good with him. You and Spike worked together so well, and I love that you enjoyed the other child actors. They all seemed to have a good time. That scene, there was a bit of meanness in the beginning, so when I was giving them directions, I was like, okay, we're gonna be mean, but just pretend. No one is gonna be really mean, okay? It's just pretend mean. So when your feelings get hurt, just pretend hurt, because it's not real. And they were just having such a good time. So that was really rewarding.
I'm good unless you guys got anything last.
Any final remarks before we leave? Anything anybody wants to say that hasn't? Please,
Oh
audience.
yeah! Oh my God! How did I forget about you?
Yes, with this film, Invisible People has created a landing page where we're going to be listing resources for people experiencing homelessness, what can be done, how can they find help, in linking with this story that we just told. So the law continues to change surrounding homelessness and eviction, especially with this state of emergency. Now we're coming out of this COVID years. We're seeing a surge of that, especially because minimum wage hasn't increased, but the housing crisis is a real crisis. And we're all trying to just stay housed. So thank you for bringing that up, and we are going to be listing resources.
I don't think I'm best qualified to answer, as Charlie here is a friend of mine who I first met living in a tent, and he had a full-time job. But California and Los Angeles has done a state emergency before. So if you notice, there's a lot of talk. I'm hoping that our new mayor will put some teeth behind it, but right now it's just rhetoric. And it's a really real one of the issues is homelessness is a symptom, not a cause. So to end homelessness, you got to fix affordable housing, you got to cure racism, lack of a living wage, fix the criminal justice system, foster care, everything else. You have to go upstream. We got to cure all that. Here in Los Angeles, organizations have been housing people more than they ever have, but there's so many entering into homelessness. I don't know what the current data is, but last I knew it was like they were housing 200 people a day and 350 are entering into homelessness. So you're losing that battle and everybody's complaining, oh, they're spending all this money. Well, yeah, but we're not closing the door, right? You know, and that's where we have to get to. At some point, we have to prevent homelessness and then work to get the people off the street. It is a complicated issue, but politically, you know, everybody wants to say from the nonprofits on up saying, we're ending homelessness. You can't. It's not a thing, right? Until you fix poverty and all these things that cause. So I have seen, I love Los Angeles. I've been here a long time. I was homeless in Los Angeles. I was a television executive in Los Angeles, you know, doing what we do now. I hope for the best, but like every couple of months I go, gosh, it can't get worse and it gets worse. It can't get worse and it gets worse. It can't get worse and it gets worse. So we have some new city council members that hopefully will be able to influence some change. I don't think a declaration of emergency, it's been an effing emergency for a long time, okay? Just saying it is not going to influence a whole lot of change. Doing action, and then hopefully Karen Bass will be able to do it. But right now, all I'm seeing is and we're doing this backwards because I got a text. What was the question? And somebody very nicely asked, you know, in Los Angeles, the mayor has now done a emergency declaration, and how is eviction going to play a part?
Well, just
Karis,
to kind of
go ahead.
Just to kind of go to that really quickly, a friend of ours actually did send this link to Karen Bass's office. So we're hoping that someone actually does take the time to show this to her. We don't know what'll happen, but like Mark said, hopefully there'll be some teeth behind that.
I'm loud.
But yeah.
They watch me.
All right, come on now.
Any other from the audience? Well, we're coming up on time here, and I want to thank the theater audience, and I want to thank all of you online. We also launched today a campaign for you to all contact your legislators, state and federal, to create a permanent emergency rental assistance fund. There's a link in the description of this video, of the movie. You heard Dianne Yentel say that it does matter. We have to fix the affordable housing crisis. We have to prevent homelessness, and we all have to do it. And I can't imagine what's going to happen if we don't. So thank you, everybody. Please click on the link, contact your legislators, invisiblepeople.tv, fight eviction, and let's influence some change.